Services Officer Pastures. I work with the Central Tablelands Local Land Services. I've been with them for the last 3 years, since the inception of the Local Land Services. Previous to that, I spent 17 years as a pasture agronomist in Armidale, on the Northern Tablelands, and also 5 years as an adjunct lecturer at the University of New England, talking about pasture agronomy. And a bit about my background: I'm quite interested in climate. I did a masterclass with DAF and MLA looking at climate adaptation and mitigation across Australia. So I'm kind of interested in that kind of sphere of what can we do and what can we do now as well. I'm talking about sustainable grazing and pasture practices today. Can you all hear me? Yeah. No, I walk and talk. It's part of my nervous twitch, I suppose, but I walk and talk. And look, I just had major dental surgery last week, and if I start drooling, it's because I'm really excited. Okay, I was all right yesterday with my talk yesterday. Okay, so just as I said, I work for Central Tablelands Local Land Services. I'm a pasture person, so I'm happy to talk to you about your pastures and soils and that layer. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But besides me, there's also Phil Cranny, and he's my colleague based in Orange. And if you're going to the Orange one, you'll hear from Phil. And he does the kind of what we call the western side, I suppose, of the Central Tablelands LLS area. I cover what we call the eastern portion. So I cover from Bathurst east to the escarpment. I do Oberon, Bathurst, Hill End, Safala. I do also Mudgee, where I'm based, Golgong and Rylstone. So I kind of cover that area. And then Phil does Orange, Clare, Canowindra, those kind of areas, Cumnock, that kind of area at the Central Tablelands LLS. And so I'm going to talk about sustainable grazing and pasture practices. I'll iterate a little bit about the climate change side of things, but I wanted to talk to you about one practice that you can do on your small farms or in your farming system that are really important, that ties in so many aspects of soil and pasture health. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But the thing I wanted to mention, and some of you may have seen this, I may have presented this at some of the workshops I've had before. This is actually Jim Scott, one of my previous lecturers at the university, and he talked about this ability to say soils are very important, but on the bottom of soils there's pastures, and that's where I kind of work in that sphere. But we're interested also in animals and crops and the dollars that we get from that livestock as well. But thinking about the soils are very important and the pastures are very important, and that's where I work. And when we're talking about sustainability, we're also talking about, there's a fair bit of research out there in terms of pastures and sustainability about what not necessarily makes you money, but if we start putting on some form of indices, do they tick the boxes? There's a fair bit of work out there from previous researchers looking at making sure that we have good ground cover, but also perennial pastures. And there's another body of work that looked at everything almost on the farm and said if we give them indices, which system might be better for us? And what it came out with is that it all depends. This is a Cicerone project on the Northern Tablelands, which I was involved with. It really said it depends. It depends on what kind of base of indices and what weight you put on those indices, what you're trying to get out of the system. Our soil landscapes in our pastures change, don't they? They go from a very wet area down to the creek sometimes, up to a very dry area near our trees. And we can't have one necessary species that fits the whole part of that landscape. We do need diversity in our pastures, but also diversity for different growth seasons, for growing the different seasons, but also that we have the diversity for different climatic events as well. So we have a diversity is very, very important. It makes it more interesting anyway. We have a good loading component. We have well-adapted species. And what I mean by that is that when we're thinking about species, they're adapted to that system. That we're not pushing up and saying, well, I really want to put Phalaris in a very acid soil. And yes, it might grow, but it may not perform or persist. So are we wasting our money by putting that in there? So thinking about what's well adapted to that environment is very important. I'll show you a couple of slides on that in a moment. Having something that's very robust to handle climate differences, but also to handle pests and diseases. Having a good growth rate at different times of the year, good water use efficiency, and good herbage mass and quality to satisfy those animal requirements. That's what we're trying to get out of that pasture. So making sure we've got the right plant for the right place, for the right purpose, and for the right management. And that's a quote from Evergrade, which is a big project. You can go and have a look at the website about sustainable pastures. So what affects pasture production? Rain. Rain. That's always a good one, rain. So there's a number of things that affect pasture production. And when we start drilling down, we can see there's a whole lot of things that affect pasture production. And it's not just one thing. It could be the soils factor. It could be the amount of the pH level, for example. It could be environmental factors, rain does come into it. Animal factors, grazing management factors, and also plant factors as well. So there's a whole heap of things that come into having good pastures and sustainable pastures. The other thing to remember, and this is the graph I was saying, that growth rate, so having that pasture suiting your animals. So when this is a growth curve for the central tablelands area, and it actually says that, you know, funnily enough, we get a feed gap in the middle of winter. Why might that be? Cold? Yeah, and we just have to suggest that perhaps if it's getting a little bit warmer during winter, one of the things we're likely to see is a little bit more growth during winter. What does that mean to our soil moisture during winter? We're going to make sure we've got good soil moisture there, but if we're going to have plants which are going to grow, they're going to use more soil moisture. So where that cut-off happens in spring is going to be very, very interesting. And whether we're going to have what we call a shorter spring in some of the climate predictions, it's going to be relied a little bit on how much growth we get during winter because the temperatures are warmer and we're using that soil moisture. Important to know. So here we have a feed gap that happens in winter because it's cold. We get a bit of a feed gap in January, February. Why is that? It's a bit hot. But it also depends on the pasture species we have as well. And so this is available. I've got copies of this on the table out there as well. Thinking about where those pasture species grow, how we might use them. Jess mentioned things like silage or hay. You know, so maybe making sure that feed gap is filled if we make some hay and silage where it's growing the most in that spring period. I just wanted to talk about some of the pasture benchmarks. So I'm not going to hone in too much on this, but to say some of the pasture benchmarks that we know for this area include having good ground cover, 70 to 100% depending on what part of the landscape. Having good litter, that's some work that was done by Evergrades. Having a good diversity of species, so having a good percentage of legumes. So it's not just about diversity for legumes, they give you that free nitrogen from the atmosphere, woohoo, free N, that's great. But also having a diversity is important for our animals as well as in our species. Having a difference in C3 and C4. What that means is having different temperate or tropical pasture species. So able to use that moisture when it falls. Having 80% perennials. This is some work that was done by Kemp and Dowling in Orange. Having different functional groups, some work that was done by CSIRO, talking about having different types of plants and diversity in our pastures. Also having different pasture quantities, different quality, height, and some pests and diseases are some of the benchmarks that are out there. And if you'd like to discuss those, I'm happy to go through them in some more details. There's other pasture benchmarks out there as well, in terms of DCs per hectare, DCs per hectare per millimetre of rainfall. That's a very interesting one. And it says, okay, can we predict how much rain we're likely to have, or how much rain we've had, whether we need to take our stock off those pastures. Kilograms of green dry matter per hectare, water use efficiency, and methane emissions. Now I did some work at with the University of New England and DPI, when I was at DPI, looking at methane emissions and looking at the amount of methane produced in different parts of the landscape and how we might mitigate that. Some of the soil benchmarks you might have heard of. There's three areas of soil health that I see in terms of soil chemistry, the physical nature of the soil, and also soil biology. And I just wanted to mention one of those soil benchmarks, and then we'll kind of go into a bit more detail with why I think soil health is important. So one of the things that we've been doing just recently is looking at legumes and nodulation. And those nodules on the bottom of your root systems, so the little bumps on the bottom of the root systems in your legumes, annuals or perennial legumes, things like subclover or white clover that you might have in your pastures, they have these little nodules, and those little nodules host or is a home of rhizobia. And that rhizobia is able to fix that nitrogen from the atmosphere. So I'm not going to do soil chemistry for you, lucky you, but to say that these nodules are quite important. We've just done a bit of a survey across the Bathurst area looking at the nodules, the score of those nodules on those root systems and whether they're adequate in terms of what we're looking at. And one of the things that we found was that pH had a huge impact on those ability of those nodules to be there and enough adequate to fix that nitrogen. This is a bit of interesting research that's just come out that says it's not just the plant that's affected by pH, but it's also the rhizobia that's affected by pH as well. So one of the things I really want to talk to you about today is ground cover and the importance of ground cover. And it's one of the most important benchmarks for soil and pasture health. It's a sustainability indicator, but it's also a production indicator. And it's one thing you can do at home and monitor your pastures. And you can do it in spring, you can do it in autumn. You can set some time aside to go and estimate your ground cover. And ground cover is very important for soil health reasons. And so it's directly related to litter, but it's also very important when we're talking about the biological nature of the soil, because it gives food, but it's also housing for those microbes. But it's also important for chemistry of the soil, but also the physical nature of making sure we've got good structure in our soil. And many of our land degradation issues are associated with not using water wisely. So there's some things which, if we're not using our water wisely, that they can be a land dead issue. So when it rains, where does water go?
Down.
Down, yeah. So deep drainage, or down into the groundwater, or in lateral flow. Where else? There's one way. Where's the others? What happens to the water when it rains? Where's it go? Runs off. So we have that runoff. Okay, what else? Evaporates, yep.
And gets taken up by plants.
Hopefully it gets taken up by the plants, yes. So it can go into what we call 4 different pathways. And when we're talking about ground cover, it's also making sure that we use that water wisely when it falls. So we have maximum plant use. So thinking about having, once again, those adapted plants, having those appropriate pasture species that will actually use that moisture. Having correct nutrient balance for those plant species, having the appropriate pasture and grazing management, and making sure that protect the plants that are there, and having that mulch, which is that ground cover. You know, your gardens, if you put mulch on those gardens to keep the moisture where it is. So we want that moisture to go through the plants. Now, I've been given the 4 minutes, so I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but to say that appropriate, 2 minutes, appropriate species. Here are some of the species, and you can come and talk to me about these in terms of where they might fit in the landscape. Do we make a decision on appropriate species based on their pH, their tolerance to pH, or their tolerance to waterlogging or to drought? Minimising soil evaporation, once again, what's the part of the equation there? Is having good ground cover. Minimising and moderate drainage, what do we do to minimise that drainage? Making sure we've got good perennial pasture species there, but ground cover comes into that as well. And managing surface runoff. If we lose 1 millimetre of soil across a hectare, that's 7.5 to 10 tonnes of soil that we can lose. So we want to make sure that the soil that we have is kept where it is. So what's good ground cover? It's about canopy cover and also about contact cover. So making sure that we've got good ground cover. It includes litter. It includes any matter that stops the energy of that raindrop falling on that soil. Good ground cover, we talk about some of the research that's been done, and around that 70% is important. But we also then say that we should have up to 100% in some of our landscape. Where might that be? It might be on the riparian zones, it might be on high slopes. If you'd like to know more about how to estimate it, and also some of those pictures, and you want to do that monitoring yourself, I do have these pictures and everything else at the table to pick up, and I'm happy to walk through you how you might do those measurements. So just in terms of sustainable grazing and pasture practices, there are things you can do in terms of soils, making sure you've got good soil, but also having good ground cover, and that's partly to do with the grazing side of things. Now I can't go through this in 1 minute of what you can do in terms of grazing, but to be able to estimate your ground cover and say at that particular point in time, can I move my animals somewhere else? Do I need to offload my animals? Do I need to make sure that I have the right pasture species there that make sure they have good ground cover? Is very, very important. And also thinking about the stage of growth as well. So making sure the litter goes back, forming that ground cover for having that protection of that soil. There are some resources that are set on the table. There's also some websites to go and have a look at. The AWI, the MLA website, the Evergraze website, important. Pasture Establishment Guide, if you're thinking about the most appropriate species. I do have a copy of that here today. And there's also apps to talk about stocking rate and when you might say, okay, is it time to sell, is it time to feed, what am I going to do to protect my ground cover? So you want to know more? There's a couple of workshops coming up. In June, the 8th of June at Taranaki, they're at the Rural Fire Centre there, we're talking about the soils workshop, some soils work that we did deeper down in the soil, looking at soil acidity. There's some pasture health workshops coming up in Orange, and I have one coming up in Bathurst in about a month's time. There's pasture identification workshops coming up. Come and see me about those. Small farm field days, we've got a couple of those planned for the next 12 months. And grazing management workshops, one of the ones that we'll be doing this year is in regards to horses. So if you're interested in those, come and see me and I'll make sure that you get that information. And that's my talk today.